Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Subscribe to my channel. Continue part 2.
But deep down, a flicker of unease stirred within her. Her stepmother said nothing, simply watching with that infuriating smirk. The silence pressed against Evelyn's chest, making her throat tighten involuntarily. She reached for the envelope and dumped its contents onto the table without much care. The moment her eyes landed on the photos, the smirk on her lips slowly faded. There they were, Oliver and Isabella, seated together in an upscale restaurant. The intimacy in their body language was undeniable. Oliver leaning in slightly, Isabella resting her head on his shoulder, her fingers grazing his wrist in a way that spoke of familiarity and something deeper. Evelyn's heart clenched painfully. She picked up a photo, studying every detail, searching for something, anything, that could disprove the truth staring her in the face. But it was all too clear. Her grip tightened around the edges of the pictures, and for a fleeting moment, the mask of indifference cracked. She had allowed herself to believe, even if just a little, that Oliver had begun to care for her, and now all of that seemed like a cruel joke. Her stepmother shrugged, her tone laced with false sympathy. Oliver was never truly yours, Evelyn. You're just a temporary distraction for him. If you're smart, you'll know what to do. Evelyn leaned back into the chair, tilting her head as she studied her stepmother with a defiant gleam in her eyes. And what would you suggest, mother dearest? Should I cry and run away? Sorry to disappoint, but I'm not that kind of woman. She forced a smile, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Her stepmother chuckled lightly, rising from her seat. She placed a patronizing hand on Evelyn's shoulder, a final gesture of condescension. Do what you will, Evelyn. Just don't let yourself become too pitiful. With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving behind a faint trail of expensive perfume. Evelyn sat frozen for a moment, staring blankly at the pile of photographs before her. The indifference she had so carefully crafted began to crumble. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced over the image of Oliver looking at Isabella with a tenderness she had never seen directed at herself. Lately, he had been distant, working late nights, missing dinners, ignoring her calls. She had convinced herself it was just work, that Oliver was simply the cold, detached man he had always been. But now it all made sense. The late nights, the silence, the absence. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. The rebellious, carefree Evelyn Carter had actually allowed herself to believe in something as foolish as love. She shook her head, pouring herself another glass of wine and downing it in one go, hoping the alcohol would dull the ache in her chest. But no amount of liquor could erase the image of Oliver and Isabella that now burned itself into her mind. She rose abruptly, pulling back the heavy curtains to gaze out at the dazzling city skyline, the glittering lights of London, the endless stream of people. Everything kept moving forward, yet she felt stuck at a crossroads with nowhere to go. Her grip tightened on the curtain, her breathing ragged. She knew she had to make a choice, but did she have the strength to walk away from it all? Picking up her phone, Evelyn's fingers hovered over Oliver's contact. She hesitated, her thumb wavering over the screen before she let out a quiet, bitter sigh and tossed the phone onto the couch. If Oliver truly cared, he would have to prove it himself. As for her, perhaps it was time to leave, like a storm that refused to be tamed by anyone. While Evelyn struggled with the turmoil in her heart, Oliver found himself facing a far more tangible threat. Isabella had not only returned to disrupt his marriage, but she had set her sights on his career as well. One late evening, while Oliver was buried in work at his office, Isabella appeared unannounced, her sharp gaze prowling like a predator. "We need to talk, Alex." She seated herself without invitation, sliding a thick folder across the desk toward him. "If you don't want your company to collapse, you know what you have to do." Oliver opened the folder, his face an unreadable mask as he skimmed through the contents. Isabella had already lured several key stakeholders to her side, orchestrating a financial crisis that could bring Whitmore Enterprises to its knees. But what made his blood run cold was her thinly veiled threat aimed at Evelyn. "If you don't want your precious wife to have an accident anytime soon, I suggest you think carefully." Isabella's voice dripped with venom, her eyes dark with malice. Oliver clenched his fists, struggling to keep his composure. He knew Isabella well enough to understand that she never made empty threats. Rumors of a major investor pulling out of the company had already begun to circulate, causing unrest among the shareholders. The pressure was mounting, and Oliver found himself standing at a crossroad between saving his company and protecting the woman who had unexpectedly found a place in his heart. The situation reached a breaking point when a major investor suddenly announced their withdrawal from a crucial project, sending shockwaves through the company. The financial reports painted a dire picture. Stocks plummeting, red figures flashing across the screens, and emergency meetings stretching late into the night. Oliver practically lived in his office, fighting tooth and nail to stabilize the empire his family had built over the years. Sleepless nights became his new normal, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like never before. Despite his efforts to shield Evelyn from the chaos, the growing distance between them did not go unnoticed. Oliver's absence from home, his late-night phone calls, and the relentless exhaustion etched into his features, all of it fed into Evelyn's growing doubts. Each passing day, she found herself questioning if the words her stepmother had whispered to her were true. Evelyn's growing doubts were only fueled by Oliver's increasing distance. The malicious words of her stepmother suddenly seemed more plausible than ever. Oliver had become colder, more distant, and the lonely dinners in the vast mansion made her feel like nothing more than an accessory. She began to question if she was indeed just a plaything in his grand scheme, as her stepmother had so cruelly suggested. One afternoon, in search of some fresh air and an escape from her thoughts, Evelyn found herself in a quiet cafe by the roadside. As she sipped her coffee absent-mindedly, she overheard a group of Whitmore employees seated at a nearby table, engaged in a hushed but intense conversation. They were discussing the dire state of the company, the looming threat of bankruptcy, and Oliver's relentless efforts to secure a financial solution. Evelyn's heart nearly stopped when she heard one of them say, "If we don't secure new investment within a week, we're all out of jobs." Those words echoed in her mind, repeating over and over like a relentless drumbeat. She stood frozen, the bustling city noise fading into a distant hum as the realization hit her like a thunderbolt. Oliver wasn't distant because he was tired of her or because of the wager she had long suspected. He was fighting a silent war to save his company, to protect thousands of employees. A wave of guilt washed over Evelyn, tightening around her chest like an iron grip. She had been so absorbed in her own insecurities and doubts that she had failed to notice the burden Oliver was shouldering. She recalled the long nights he spent at the office, the fatigue etched into his face, and the silent stares that she had mistaken for indifference. But now everything made perfect sense. He was struggling, fighting, and he had been doing it alone. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the edge of the chair, trying to steady herself against the flood of emotions rushing through her. She had judged him too harshly, let her insecurities cloud her vision, and turned her back on him when he needed her most. For so long, Evelyn had believed that she was the loneliest person in the world. But now she realized that Oliver's solitude was just as profound. His was the loneliness of responsibility, the weight of expectations crushing down on him. Taking a deep breath, her resolve hardened. She couldn't just stand by anymore, not out of obligation or guilt, but because she cared, deeply, undeniably. The man she once thought she despised had, without her realizing it, carved a place in her heart. She knew what she had to do. It was time to prove to everyone, and to herself, that she wasn't just a reckless socialite, a girl with no purpose beyond fleeting pleasures. Evelyn decided to use the inheritance her mother had left her, an untouched fortune she had always guarded closely, to save Oliver's company. Not because he needed her help, but because she wanted to be his silent strength, just as he had been hers in ways she hadn't noticed before. With newfound determination, Evelyn left the cafe, her steps firm, her gaze unwavering. The doubts and fears that had plagued her were gone, replaced by a singular purpose, to stand by Oliver and face whatever came their way together. Without wasting another moment, she returned to the Whitmore estate, heading straight to her study. Pulling out her financial records, she stared at the vast wealth her mother had left behind. The money had always been a reminder of her past, of the love she once had, and she had never touched it out of respect and longing. but now it could serve a greater purpose. Evelyn picked up the phone, her voice calm yet resolute as she spoke to her lawyer. Transfer a significant portion of my inheritance to Whitmore Group. I want it done immediately, no delays. The lawyer hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by her sudden interest in serious financial matters. Evelyn had always been known for her lavish spending, never for her business acumen, but she simply smirked at his hesitation, her tone unwavering as she continued. This isn't an impulsive decision. I know exactly what I'm doing. That very night, the funds were transferred. Evelyn didn't inform Oliver. She knew he would never accept her help easily, and she didn't need him to. This wasn't about his pride or her validation. It was about standing in the shadows, being the silent pillar he could lean on without even realizing it. As she stared out of the window into the dark city skyline, Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was finally doing something that mattered, not just for him, but for them. The next day at the Whitmore Group headquarters, news of the mysterious investment spread like wildfire across departments. Oliver sat in the boardroom with the senior shareholders, his face composed as always, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise. A substantial sum had just been transferred into the struggling project fund, enough to sustain operations for the coming months and even aid in restructuring their business strategy. You've really outdone yourself, Oliver. I didn't expect you'd be able to secure such a large investment in such a short time, an older shareholder remarked, nodding approvingly. Oliver clenched his hands beneath the table, his mind racing with questions. He knew without a doubt that he had not yet found a new investor, and this money couldn't have appeared out of thin air. The timely intervention of the investment had pulled Whitmore Group back from the brink of collapse. Key projects were restarted, shareholders regained confidence, and the market slowly showed signs of recovery. While the company was stabilizing, Oliver was left with one pressing question. Who was behind this mysterious investment? He had combed through every financial record, contacted potential partners, yet no clues surfaced. The only detail left behind was a simple signature, E. Carter. It couldn't possibly be Evelyn, he thought. In his eyes, she was still the reckless socialite, uninterested in finance or business affairs. Yet a nagging thought gnawed at the back of his mind. Could it really be her? Meanwhile, Isabella was seething with rage upon discovering that her plan to ruin Oliver had failed. She had underestimated Evelyn, a costly mistake. Worse yet, Oliver had not abandoned his wife, which deeply wounded Isabella's pride. In a fit of fury, she decided to take more drastic action. Late one evening, after attending a charity event, Evelyn was on her way back to the Whitmore estate when a speeding truck suddenly veered into her lane from the opposite direction. There was no time to react. The truck collided forcefully with the side of her car, sending it spinning into the guardrail. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. The car flipped onto its side, shards of glass scattered everywhere, and blood trickled down Evelyn's pale face. Before losing consciousness, only one thought crossed her mind. Oliver's smile. At the hospital, Oliver sat silently beside Evelyn's hospital bed, his usually composed demeanor shattered. Her face was ghostly pale, a deep gash on her forehead, standing in stark contrast to her otherwise flawless skin. He reached for her hand, his own trembling with a mix of fear and regret. "What have you done to yourself, Evelyn?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The past few days he had been consumed by work, battling the financial crisis orchestrated by Isabella. But now, sitting beside Evelyn's still body, Oliver realized how insignificant the company was compared to her. The door creaked open, and George, his assistant, entered with a thick file in hand. His expression was tense, his eyes filled with urgency. "Mr. Whitmore, there's something you need to know," George said, placing the file on the table. Oliver flipped through the pages quickly, his sharp gaze freezing when he saw the name of the new investor, Evelyn Carter. His breath caught in his throat, his grip tightening on the papers as every transaction, every financial trail confirmed the truth. Evelyn was the one who had saved his company. "This can't be," Oliver murmured, memories flashing through his mind. Her exhausted eyes when he came home late, the disappointment that flickered across her face when he grew distant. George cleared his throat, his voice cautious. Mrs. Whitmore made the investment through an anonymous financial trust. She didn't want you to know. Oliver's hands trembled as he held the documents. She had sacrificed everything without expecting recognition. The realization hit him like a tidal wave, filling his chest with both pain and an overwhelming sense of love. He gently brushed a strand of hair from Evelyn's face, his voice barely above a whisper, filled with guilt and tenderness. Why did you do this for me without saying a word? I've been so blind, Evelyn. I didn't see that you were always there for me. All the walls he had built around himself, all the emotions he had buried, threatened to spill over. He had been so focused on fighting Isabella that he had neglected the one person who truly cared for him. Staring at Evelyn's frail figure, Oliver felt an ache unlike any he had ever known. He had let her feel alone, left her drowning in doubts and insecurities, while she silently stood by his side, protecting him in ways he never imagined. Evelyn, I'm sorry. Please, wake up. He leaned closer, pressing a soft kiss to her cold hand. Though she remained in a coma, Oliver knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would never let her slip away again. From this moment on, he was determined to protect and cherish her with everything he had. When sitting beside Evelyn's hospital bed, watching her lying unconscious, a fire of fury ignited within Oliver. He couldn't just sit back and watch the woman he loved suffer without taking action. The incident was too much of a coincidence to be an accident. Isabella had always been ruthless, and this time Oliver knew she had crossed the line. George, I want you to conduct a thorough investigation into Evelyn's accident, Oliver said, his voice cold and sharp. Check all traffic cameras, find any irregularities. I need to know who dared to do this. George nodded without hesitation. He knew Oliver meant every word. Within a day, information started coming to light. The private investigation team Oliver had hired uncovered crucial evidence. A hidden security camera from a nearby street captured footage of a suspicious black car tailing Evelyn's vehicle just moments before the accident. The license plate was quickly traced back to a rental company, and the person who had signed the lease was none other than Isabella. Oliver's jaw clenched, his eyes darkening with fury. This time she had gone too far, and he wouldn't let it slide. I want solid evidence to bring her to justice. George wasted no time, gathering witness statements from people near the scene. A homeless man had seen the black car accelerating toward Evelyn's vehicle, and fortunately had scribbled down the plate number on an old piece of paper. With all the evidence in hand, Oliver didn't hesitate. He immediately called his legal team and contacted the police to initiate a formal investigation. That morning, as Isabella enjoyed her luxurious breakfast at a high-end hotel, she was caught off guard when several police officers barged in. Her face turned pale as she saw Oliver walking in alongside the officers. He stood tall, his gaze icy cold. Did you really think I wouldn't find out the truth? His voice was like a blade, cutting through the air. Isabella attempted to remain composed, but the steely authority and resentment in Oliver's eyes made her falter. Oliver, what are you talking about? I don't understand. She feigned innocence, but it was already too late. One of the officers stepped forward and read the arrest warrant aloud. Isabella Grayson, you are under arrest for attempted homicide and conspiracy to commit grievous bodily harm. You have the right to remain silent, but anything you say can and will be used against you in court. Isabella screamed, struggling in vain as the officers handcuffed her. She turned to Oliver, desperation and anger swirling in her eyes. You can't do this to me. We loved each other, Alex. Oliver stepped closer, looking directly into her deceitful eyes. Love, he scoffed. I once loved you, but that love died the day you betrayed me. Now you're nothing but a pathetic criminal. As the police led Isabella away, Oliver stood still, his heart heavy. He knew the battle wasn't entirely over, but at least the person who hurt Evelyn would finally face the consequences. After ensuring that Isabella was prosecuted by the law, Oliver immediately returned to the hospital. He sat down beside Evelyn's bed, holding her hand tightly and whispered, Can you hear me, Evelyn? I found the one behind all of this. You're safe now. His voice was hoarse, filled with tenderness, yet laced with pain. He realized he loved her far more than he had ever admitted to himself. Evelyn had done so much for him, and yet he had let her fall into danger. A single tear slid down Oliver's cheek. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. Please, wake up. Give me a chance to make things right." Under the soft hospital lighting, Evelyn's fingers faintly twitched. One early morning, as gentle sunlight streamed through the hospital window, illuminating Evelyn's pale face, Oliver sat beside her, his eyes weary but unwavering. His hand remained tightly wrapped around hers, feeling the faint but steady pulse beneath her skin. Suddenly, her slender fingers moved slightly. Her eyelids fluttered before slowly opening, meeting Oliver's worried yet loving gaze. Time seemed to stand still for a moment before her weak voice broke the silence. You're here?" Oliver held his breath, his heart skipping a beat at the fragile sound of her voice. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, but he quickly composed himself, squeezing her hand gently. "Yes, I'm here. I'll always be here." Evelyn tried to smile, but her lips trembled. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself feel the warmth of his presence. Memories flooded back. The accident, the doubts, the hurt. But now, looking into his eyes, all the pain seemed to fade away. "You know now, don't you?" she whispered, her gaze filled with sorrow, yet no longer avoiding his. Oliver nodded, his voice thick with emotion but resolute. I know it was you who saved the company, who stood behind me when I was too blind to see." Evelyn smiled faintly, though tears welled in her eyes. "I just wanted to help you because I knew you'd never accept it if I told you outright." Oliver squeezed her hand tighter, emotions overwhelming him. Once he had thought of her as nothing more than a reckless socialite, but now he saw Evelyn as the strong, compassionate woman she truly was. "I was wrong, Evelyn. I was so blind not to trust you, not to share my burdens with you. I'm sorry for making you bear everything alone." Evelyn gazed into his eyes, seeing the sincerity, the regret, and the deep love he held for her. In that moment, she knew he was genuine. "You know, I once thought leaving you would be the best choice, but deep down I couldn't. I love you, Oliver." Oliver couldn't hold back anymore. He leaned down, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead, tears falling freely. "I love you, Evelyn. I have for a long time. I just didn't have the courage to admit it." Evelyn smiled, her eyes shimmering in the morning light. They had endured misunderstandings and heartbreak, but what mattered was that they were here, together. A few months later, Evelyn had fully recovered. Throughout her recovery, Oliver never left her side for even a moment. Their love grew stronger, with no more secrets or distance standing between them. Today, Evelyn stood on stage at a major charity event she had been quietly planning for months. She looked elegant in a sophisticated gown, no longer the rebellious heiress of the past, but a mature, independent woman with unwavering determination. As she stepped onto the stage, her eyes instinctively searched for him, and there he was, standing in the far corner of the room, watching her with quiet pride. He didn't need to say anything. His smile spoke volumes. His gaze was filled with love, admiration, and immense pride. Evelyn took a deep breath, her voice steady as she spoke into the microphone. "I was once a lost girl, unsure of my place in this world, but I've learned that love, trust, and compassion are what make life truly meaningful." From the audience, Oliver gave her a small nod, his heart swelling with happiness. He had found not just a wife in Evelyn, but a partner, an equal, and above all, the love of his life. On a gentle evening, as the London sky was adorned with a shimmering blanket of stars, Oliver led Evelyn to the small garden behind the Whitmore estate. The soft golden lights illuminated the blooming roses, creating a breathtakingly romantic scene. Evelyn stood there, her long hair cascading down in the evening breeze, her eyes still carrying traces of the sorrow she had endured. Oliver gazed at her, his heart brimming with love and a deep sense of regret. "Evelyn," he finally broke the silence, his voice warm and sincere. She turned to face him, her piercing blue eyes filled with curiosity. "I proposed to you once before, but for all the wrong reasons. Tonight, I want to do it again, but this time, for the only reason that truly matters." Oliver slowly knelt down, pulling out a small red velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a diamond ring sparkled under the moonlight. Gone was the coldness, gone were the obligations and the bet. Only pure, heartfelt love remained in his gaze. Evelyn Carter, can you forgive me and give us another chance? I love you, not because of a wager, not out of duty, but because of who you are. You've changed my life in ways I never imagined. I want to be with you, love you, and protect you for the rest of my life. Evelyn stood still, her breath caught in her throat, tears welling in her eyes. Not tears of pain this time, but of happiness. She had been through so much, so many misunderstandings, but at this moment, she could feel the raw sincerity in Oliver's words. A gentle smile formed on her lips, one that held happiness and a multitude of emotions. Slowly, she reached out her hand, her voice soft yet resolute. I accept, Oliver. Let's start over. With real love. Relief washed over Oliver's face, and a radiant smile spread across his lips as he slid the ring onto Evelyn's finger. He stood up and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, as if silently vowing never to let her go again. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you for giving me another chance. Evelyn rested her head against his chest, closing her eyes, savoring the strong, steady heartbeat and the comforting warmth of the man she loved. We'll face everything together. Under the starlit sky, they shared a tender kiss, marking a new beginning. No more pretense, no more doubts, only genuine love and hope for the future. Their story stands as proof that love is not a game or a possession, but understanding and companionship. No matter the past, people always have the chance to change and find true happiness if they are willing to fight for it and cherish what they have. Thank you for following our story. Did this story touch your heart? Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed